In late May 2011, where were you living?
Washington, D.C.
Washington, D.C. So what had you in Joplin, Missouri on May 22nd, 2011?
My fiance's nephew was graduating from high school, so we flew in to attend the graduation.
To attend the graduation. Had you been to Joplin before?
I'm not sure that I had. I've been to like Mountain Grove, Missouri, and Springfield, Missouri, because Mountain Grove is where my fiance's parents lived, and we would always fly into Springfield and sometimes hang out there. But Joplin specific, I don't recall that I had.
Yeah, yeah. And how long were you in Joplin? Did you arrive that same day, the 22nd? Did you arrive that morning or the day before?
So the graduation was on Sunday. I think we flew in on Saturday.
Okay.
And there was a little get together at the at Steve's sister's home, and his parents were there, but they weren't there the next day. They went back home after that.
I see. Yeah.
It's good.
Yeah. So I remember that time, and I'm speaking to you about 90-minute drive south of Joplin, but down here, the news reports were that, we're expecting some storms today. And then as the day goes on, the reports become a little more intense. Were you aware of that? You're in Joplin, you're visiting. I imagine there's a lot going on, getting settled in for your short stay there. But were you aware that there were storms in the forecast for that day?
You're talking about Sunday now, the day of the tornado.
Yeah.
No, not really. The only thing I remember is when we were driving to the graduation, we had Steve's brother with us. And they were I was sitting in the back, and they were talking about the weather. It was sunny, but I guess there was something in the air that they were saying, it looks like it's just ripe for a storm, And of course, I was not an individual that really was in tune with, red sky, farmer's delight, and all that kind of stuff.
Wow.
Didn't really think about it. No, up until then, nothing.
So
didn't listen to the radio. We're visiting, so we're not really listening to the radio.
Wow.
It was before the days where you have apps on your phone for weather.
Right.
Sure.
So
no, it wasn't on my radar at all.
Yeah. So far as you remember listening to them talk about the weather, it was something that actually, when you live in the broad middle of the country for a while, you do actually kind of get good at. You can just kind of feel that something is building. That's what the conversation was like?
Yes.
That you could feel something.
They were talking about a potential for a storm. Word tornado was not used. Just a storm.
You can feel it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What do you remember about the high school graduation ceremony there in 2011?
Nothing really extraordinary. I've been to many graduations, and it kind of felt the same. You've got kids who are excited to be graduating, and all the family and friends are, they're all happy. They're about to watch this graduation. Wow. And the graduation takes place, and just the run-of-the-mill ordinary graduation. Pictures. Nothing really extraordinary.
Yeah. And how much of a gap is there? My sense of it is that sort of the end of the graduation ceremony and the recognition that a major storm was coming, these things are happening right around the same time. Is that right? In your recollection?
That's not how I remember.
Oh, what's your memory of that?
And of course, we're talking 11 years ago.
Yeah.
I recall that we were at the graduation, the ceremony happened, speakers, the handing out of the diplomas, all that stuff. And then it's over and people are kind of milling around, hugging, and congratulations and all this kind of thing.
Yeah.
And we're all starting to get kind of geared up that we're going to go back to the house. We took some pictures outside, group pictures, family pictures. I think at one point after the pictures, we went back inside the auditorium. I think we were looking for the nephew who had graduated.
Right. Yeah.
I know that I watched Steve's interview, and he mentioned that when we were in there, after we went back inside from the photos, that there were alarms. And I hadn't remembered that, but when he said that, I think I remembered that there was something going on, but it wasn't anything that lasted very long. So I don't know if alarms went off and then they went down. They probably went off because we wouldn't have gone off. But I don't remember sheltering. I don't remember us having to shelter, when you've got a warning and our alarms going off. I can picture myself, kind of like, okay, let's get into a safe place. I don't remember that part.
You don't remember?
I remember us leaving. Where we were parked, we were one of the last folks to leave the parking, because when you leave such an event, there's a mass of cars trying to get out of one exit, and so you're backed up. So I remember that thinking at the time, wow, this is going to take forever. And Steve's sister was up ahead, so they had already left. And we're sitting in the car waiting, and it's getting kind of dark. And I hear, Steve turns on the radio, and I hear them talking about a tornado warning.
Wow.
I don't know if it was warning or take cover. I don't know. I think it was warning.
Yeah.
I don't remember that specific words, and they were rattling off all these counties. At the time, I thought they were names of counties, and I have no clue what county Joplin's in,
Mm.
And I asked Steve, is this anywhere near us? And he says, he didn't respond because he was listening. So I let it be.
Mm.
And then he says, no, it's okay. We'll be okay. And then I heard sirens.
Oh.
And I saw people running into the auditorium. A few people. And I said to Steve, should we get back in? And he says, no, we'll be okay. Don't worry about it. We'll be okay. And we drove out. And
was it raining at this time, or was there a lot of wind at this time, or was it just very dark or getting dark?
I think it was dark, not as dark as it got, but it was like you see it when it's going to storm. It gets kind of not pitch black dark or it's just a dark. We had a very sunny day when we had gone to the graduation, and now you don't see sky. I don't remember wind. I probably started raining, but nothing like what we were about to experience as we were driving out. So we drive out, and we don't get very far from the auditorium, and then it starts pouring, and it's a lot darker, and you can't even see out the windshield. You can't see out the window.
Yeah.
The windshield wipers are not doing much good. And it's dark. It's really dark and somewhat windy, because when you have that much rain, there's some wind that goes with it. And we're quiet in the car, and Steve's just looking, and he pulls over temporarily. And then he pulls back out. And at the time I thought that's a good idea, because we can't see anything. And, you know, that's not too cool to be moving.
Yeah.
And you don't see anything in front of you. But then he pulled out and I said, what are you doing? And he said something like, not a good spot. I don't want to stay here. And I think he might have mentioned something about poles. I want to find a spot away from these poles.
Worrying that a pole might fall down on the car or something.
Right.
Wow.
And I got to hand it to him. He wasn't panicky or anything. He was just thinking, a big picture kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then he pulled over. There was like a little parking lot with a building. He pulled over, and I remember him putting the car in park. Didn't turn the car off. And we sat there. And then I noticed that to our right, there was a car. I remember the color. It was like a navy blue. And there was a lady in the car by herself. And she was emotional. Uh-oh. She was crying. I hear her. But she was on the phone. So she must have been on the phone with somebody. And then I turned to Steve. And on his side, on the other side of the street, there was this big tree. And I watched it do this, come down in slow motion. I'd never seen such a thing. It was like slow motion. Usually, you know, you think, boom. This was slow motion. And I'm just like looking at this thing. And then Steve says, get down.
Wow.
So I lean forward.
Yeah. Let me pause you here. So you say you see this lady in the navy blue car, and she's also parked in the same parking lot that you go into?
Yes, she's closer. She's to my right, and she's parked closer to this building that I guess this parking lot belonged to.
Yeah. And then a couple minutes ago, you said that you were very quiet. Both of you in the car were very quiet. So you got this, you're in the car, it's very quiet. The rain is so fierce, at least at that moment, you can't see out. Now you've moved to a different parking lot. You see this woman who's very emotional in the car. You see this tree going down in slow motion. That's a pretty powerful image. I'm assuming you haven't ever experienced anything close to this before, and we haven't really even gotten to, the core of the story yet. But at this point, let's just pause it right when you see that tree going down in slow motion. I'm assuming you haven't seen anything like this before.
Nope.
Yeah.
Ever. I remember when we were in Ann Arbor, I went to University of Michigan, and I would summer at a engineering firm, and I remember us getting involved with designing buildings for tornadoes.
Oh, wow.
We talked about the difference in pressure and all this kind of stuff. I would hear stories about tornadoes. My sister, she lived in Louisiana for a short period, and before they moved back east, their house got hit by a tornado, but all it did was some roof damage, tree damage. That's it.
Yeah.
So it wasn't really a significant tornado.
Right.
And they seemed okay. They'd say, yeah, we got, they didn't seem traumatized by it or anything. I remember talking, to people, and they're saying that it sounds like a train, tornado sound. And it was at the back of my mind. I thought, how can a tornado sound like a train? And there was like a small piece somewhere in my head thinking, I wonder what it feels like. And it's like, it's not wanting to be in one, but I remember thinking that several times. And after this event, I was like, I sure hope I didn't wish this on myself,
Wow.
Because not in a million years would I have imagined that what I saw, particularly after the images of the destruction, is really what really stuck with me.
When you see the tree go down, and are these things the question I want to ask is what's in your mind? And, it was 11 years ago, and also the answer might be nothing. But, I mean, are these things you learned when you were a student about tornadoes? Maybe the way to think of it is your mind, when we experience new things, our mind goes looking for other experiences to try to latch onto to make some sense of what's happening. You had studied tornadoes a bit in your training as an engineer. Was your mind doing that, just trying to like dig back into those old lessons about what's going on? Or how would you describe your own state of mind when Steve says get down?
Well, I'll back up to the tree coming down. When I was watching it, I wasn't trying to analyze what I saw. I was like, that's interesting.
Yeah.
Real calm. The thought of a tornado or that we were going to be in a tornado didn't enter my mind.
Really?
When Steve said, get down, the tone of his voice, and, of course, I had the lady next to me crying. So I'm thinking we're in a serious situation. So I'm going to get down. I get down, I lean forward to get below the dashboard. And then shortly thereafter, Steve comes over me. And then you hear a roar. And the car starts rocking back and forth. And there's these loud bangs. And I'm pulling Steve as close as possible to me. And what's going on in my head is I'm worried about his head.
Mm-hmm.
His head getting hit by something. I don't know what's going on above us. I had no clue what was going on above us until after we got up, but that was a thought that was in my head, is his head. And then I was chanting over and over in my mind, please protect us. God, please protect us. God, please, over and over and over. And the intensity of there was this intense feeling in the car as it's rocking back and forth and these loud thuds. And I'm thinking, and it seemed like it was going to go on forever. And I'm like, when is this going to stop? And there's a sense that it might not stop because it's just, I can't explain that feeling that I've not experienced it before or since. At the time I had said it almost felt like it was evil, but I don't want to say that it was evil. It's just because it was so miserably intense. It just felt like something was in there with us, but all it was just all that noise and rock back and forth.
Wow.
Didn't realize that the glass of the windows had broken. Didn't realize that because it just focused on God, please protect us, and pulling Steve as close to me as possible and worrying about his head. That was what was going on as that. And it felt like it was a long time. I'm sure it wasn't, but it felt like a long time.
So you're worried about something hitting Steve's head. So you must have, even if, in that moment, you're not specifically aware that the windows had been blown out. Were you aware that stuff was blowing into the car, though? Actual projectiles were entering the car?
No.
Okay.
I just, maybe it was because we're huddled.
Yeah.
And he's over me, and I'm hoping that, there's a reason we're being huddled down. No, I didn't have a vision at that time that stuff was flying through the car.
Yeah. Yeah. How would you describe yourself? Well, first of all, do you know how long it took? You said it seemed like it was going to go on forever. Do you know actually roughly how long it lasted until the storm passed where your car was?
I can't really quantify it.
Yeah.
Probably, I can't.
Yeah.
I'm guessing it was probably no more than 5 minutes, but I don't know.
But that sounds like forever.
Yeah, and it may not have been that long, but it just seemed like it was just going to go on forever.
How would you describe yourself? You said that you're praying. I forget the exact words you used.
God please protect.
God, please protect us. What's the underlying feeling? Is the underlying feeling just sort of an intense hanging on, kind of a resignation? Whatever happens, happens. How would you describe the underlying sentiment? And again, I understand. I mean, it's a long time ago, and I think also when we get into these kind of things, we're talking about stuff that really is beyond words.
Mm-hmm.
What are the closest words you can use to describe your own sort of state of mind, state of being in those minutes?
I'll use words like feeling. So it felt like I was in an enclosed area, almost like in a box, with this shaking going on. There is no resignation. It's like you're waiting. I'm waiting for it to be over. Not that I'm giving up, because I have a sense that this is, sometime point, this thing's going to stop. And so it's just hanging on to Steve and waiting.
Wow.
I didn't have any thoughts that we're going to die. That didn't enter my mind. I don't think I was panicked. It was more of a, let's just hang on.
Just hang on.
Mm-hmm.
Wow. Did it sound like a train?
To me, it didn't.
No,
it just sounded like a big roar, and like I talked about earlier, they always talked about a train. I always envisioned that it would be like you're hearing an oncoming train, but I didn't correlate the noise to a train. It was just a big roar.
Wow.
And I had up until that point been on a train track as part of my job with a train going by, I didn't put the two together.
The storm passes then, and then what? After this tremendous roar, does it just get very, very quiet?
It gets very quiet. And we wait a little bit. I don't know how long, but not too long. And then we Steve gets up, I get up, and we're covered in glass, little slivers of glass. And I realized later that when they design the glass in the car, they design it so that when it breaks, you've got the little pellets and you're not, to minimize, cuts and whatnot.
Not shards, yeah.
Yeah, shards. Little pieces of leaves. I think Steve had some stuff on him, maybe building material, and nothing huge, about like that. Both windows, his window and my window, are out. They're gone. Windshield's still there. Eventually, when I turned back, the windows in the back were also gone. And we're just, sitting there. Wow. And then we're like, doing this. And it is incredibly quiet. There is no sound at all. No animals, no, nothing. and there's nothing out there. You know, you look out and it's all destruction. I remember seeing a tower to my right was bent over.
What about the woman in the blue car? Do you remember anything about that after?
I looked over, she was sitting up. She was not in a panic state or anything like that.
And were her windows blown out as well?
That I don't remember. I don't remember that.
So it's interesting you say, because when you first saw her, she was in kind of a very distressed state, but you say once the storm actually passes, she was actually
and I'm looking over at her and she's looking at me, and that's it. She's not, I don't know if she was,
wow.
I mean, when you look up and you see everything in the quiet, it's, you know, that's my experience. I'm maybe assuming everybody else is like that, but it's just like, you're kind of like in awe almost, you know, awe, could be shock. There's no emotion. There's just, okay, here we go. We're here.
I'm really, in my own mind, I'm really focused on that time. You know, things get quiet. You're down for just a bit longer, then you raise up, and now you're surveying what happened. Probably if you set a stopwatch, we're talking about maybe a minute or something, maybe 2 minutes. But I'm imagining that's a little moment in time where when you rise up, you're in some sense a different person. That would be my guess. That, you know, that this experience, when you rise up and you realize you survived this thing, and you look out and see everything that happened, obviously that's going to leave an impact on you for the rest of your life. Is that right? This is just my guess, not ever having experienced anything, but I'm guessing that when you rise up, you're in some sense a different person, or changed, or, you know, somehow there's been some change, different from the person who, you know, when Steve says get down, you get down. When you get back up, maybe what I'm saying is complete nonsense, but I'm just wondering, I'm guessing that time just leaves a permanent mark.
For me, having not experienced a tornado and not realizing at that point in time what everything looked like, and how bad of a tornado this was, when I rise up, no, I don't feel like I'm a different person or anything. That came later. Once the realization of what it is that we sat in this car through came, then you start having these thoughts like, okay, why was I spared? Maybe there's something in my future that I still have to get done. That's later. At that point, I'm not feeling any different. Wow, this is all the things that you said. No, yeah. I didn't feel that. I was just in an observation mode, basically, cleaning off and observation.
And just calm.
Calm.
In that moment. Wow.
Calm and like observing a scene I had not seen before. There was no more trees. There's no green. We started the day, sunny day, lots of nice, landscaping, greenery, trees, nice trees. No trees, toothpicks. And I remember thinking toothpicks throughout the time we were there. And after that, when we did all the driving and then we flew over, it's like toothpicks, a bunch of toothpicks, no trees everywhere. It's like, I guess the tornado, it takes off all the leaves and it leaves behind a pointy end, and I associated it to toothpicks.
Yeah. And buildings as well, right? I mean,
yeah, I mean, that area that we were in, didn't have any high rise or anything, but I know there was damage to the building that we were parked next to, the tower. Up ahead, there was a gas station. And at the time, I hadn't, when you raise up, I'm not thinking when I rose up, and Steve is a little different. I don't have in my mind a picture of what it looked like before we came down that I'm comparing what we're viewing, because all I'm just seeing is there's nothing, no buildings, and toothpicks.
Wow.
Other than the building next to us, I mean, it had damage, but it had some walls up.
Yeah.
And the car next to us, the lady.
I want to ask about the lady, then I want to come back to something you said a minute ago and then pick up. So did she just then, after a minute or two, just drive away, or do you know what was the next?
I thought about that when I was thinking about this interview, and other than me looking over and looking at her and kind of seeing that she's okay, she's sitting there, and then we kind of got some distractions that happened a couple of minutes later. She disappeared. She was gone. So I'm thinking that somebody came to pick her up because her car was still there.
Okay.
She was no longer there.
She was gone. Wow.
Mm-hmm.
This
so
was
she was talking to on the phone maybe came and got her. I don't know.
Oh, yeah. Mm-hmm. I was anticipating asking this later, but you sort of touched on it earlier, questions about, why did this happen? Why did I survive? I think the number right now is 161 people didn't survive, and many others were seriously hurt. When you actually see the damage, I mean, really one of the first thoughts you have is, how is it that many, many more people did not survive? I mean, just the damage was so incredible. So people living in Joplin, that is a part of the country where tornadoes are a fact of life. In your case, you're just going to a high school graduation and you fly in from the East Coast, and within 48 hours end up in one of the most destructive tornadoes in the history of the United States. Have you ever asked yourself, some people think that, life just happens and it goes on and there's not necessarily a rhyme or reason to things. Other people think that there is a plan, in your own mind, have you, I'm imagining you've thought this over yourself, like, what was that all about? I mean, all I wanted to do was go to a high school graduation ceremony, and I ended up being in one of the most destructive tornadoes in American history. This is not where I lived. I was just a visitor. I imagine you've gone through that in your mind. What was all that about?
It was normal for us to go to this graduation. So, we went to family events all the time, but I thought that Steve and I were spared because there was a bigger purpose for us down the road. Because the fact, and the car next to us didn't get overturned or anything. But up ahead, there was a car flipped on its, it was upside down.
Yeah.
We'll get into it later, but I remember seeing a house that didn't seem as damaged as the ones around it. And I'm thinking, there has to be, not has to be. What is the rhyme and reason to this? That some things get totally destroyed and other things don't. And I believe that there's a rhyme, there's a reason for everything in this life. You look at nature, there's an order to it. There's a reason for things. You may look and say, why is this? But there's a reason if you step back. So that's what I came away with it. Okay, we were spared because we're going to do something down the road that will help somebody or something. I remember after, coming back home and everything, and I didn't say it to many people, but, the few people that say, oh yeah, I was in the Joplin tornado, they don't have a clue. And I watched their reaction, and then I just stopped, I said, okay. Because you can't expect people to understand what that means if they haven't been in it.
Right. No, that's right. And that was the case for me. I mean, we were, again, a 90-minute drive south, and we heard the news. And I'd never thought about Joplin before. I'd heard of it, but I'd never been there. Heard that the hospital had been hit. Saw that President Obama went. Listened to President Obama's speech at in Joplin a few days later. And then the story kind of faded from my mind. And it wasn't until the next month that I actually went to Joplin. It got back into my mind that I needed, maybe I should go up and try to do something. And I went back up and actually saw it. And, and that's when I just saw the magnitude of it. And it was just mind-boggling. I can't imagine your situation. You're actually there as it's happening. And to see the immediate aftermath. I mean, I saw the aftermath a month later, where there had been some cleanup, the roads were cleared. You're there, I was going to say I can imagine the scene, but I can't imagine the scene, not having been there. So you rise up, you look at the woman there in the navy blue car, you sort of acknowledge one another's presence, you acknowledge that both of you made it through. And then what happens next in the next few minutes?
And we might have said something like, are you okay? Are you okay? Kind of thing.
Yeah.
There's a couple of events, and I think I'm remembering them in the correct order. So we're sitting there, and then I see a young girl walking down the street, heading towards us. And I recognized that she had been one of the speakers at the graduation. And I'm watching her, and I'm thinking she's in shock, because she's not walking with purpose, when you're walking and you're going somewhere. She's just kind of in a daze. I say to Steve, I think this girl's in shock. He goes to open his door, and he can't get it open. And this event, Steve and I remember differently. But my recollection of it was then I got out of my car, out of my side. And I went up to her and I said, are you okay? And I kind of guided her to our car. And the back seat was covered in glass and debris. And so it took a sunglass case and kind of scraped off glass and sat her down. And I think my raincoat was back there. I put it on her, because I'd always heard that if somebody's in shock, you need to cover them. And I think before that, we heard a man. I think about it. We heard a man, and he was calling for help. and he was calling for, and I think he said, "Mother, help, somebody, I need help with my mother." And that might have been when Steve tried to open the door. Couldn't get there. And then we saw the girl, and I went and got her. And as in the process of getting her, Steve got out of the car. I had to climb over.
He got out of the passenger side. Yeah.
And he checked, are you okay with the girl? And then he said, let me go see what that was about. And he goes. He's not gone too long, because it was to the right of us that happened. I don't remember what vehicle or anything it was. And he comes back, and he's shaking his head. And he says, there's nothing I can do. This is pretty bad. And I'm like looking at him, and he says, she's impaled. Mm-hmm. So she's got something stuck. I don't know. I don't think we got back into the car to sit down, but I remember thinking, where's the emergency vehicles? Because at this point now it's dawning on me that enough time has gone by and I'm not hearing sirens or anything, no ambulances, no fire trucks, no police, nothing. And at the time it really struck me like, this is odd.
Was there almost a feeling of like, have we been abandoned or something like that? Like, is no one going to come and help?
I think maybe the word abandoned might have kind of like, been there, like, where's the help? So that's abandonment.
Yeah.
And I don't know, Steve, I think maybe at one point went to further down to see what was, if he's something he can do to help somebody. And then at one point, and during that whole thing, we're trying to reach his sister to tell her we're okay and to check on them, because we knew that they were ahead of us, but we didn't know where they were in all this. And at the same time, the young lady in the back is also trying to reach her parents, her father. She said, I'm trying to reach my father. I can't reach my dad. I can't reach my dad. That's actually the first thing she said to us. And came to realize, we received a text from either Steve's sister or niece. I don't remember which one. And we shared with her that you can text, but she had discovered that. And we learned that Steve's sister was at home. They'd made it home. And that I think maybe they also said, she also said that Steve's niece and husband were also okay. They had taken shelter by a movie theater or something, and they were going to try and get to us. I think they were the ones that were trying to get to us. And during all this, then a gentleman approaches the car on Steve's side, the driver's side, and he says, I hadn't noticed him coming down at us, but he says, can my mother sit in your car? And sure. And she was standing in the road, and he went and got her. And I don't know if he carried her over or she came on her own. I don't remember that, but remember him that when he approached us, he was by himself, and then he went and got her, put her in the back. She had a blanket around her. She was in her nightgown. He was in sweats, and Steve and this gentleman, they kind of like conversed. And now I think at that point I'm sitting in the car, and there's two ladies, the young girl and the
Yeah.
older lady sitting in the back. You start seeing people milling around, kind of coming out of their holes, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. And were they also, how would you describe them? Was it kind of they're kind of dazed as well?
I don't know, they were far
Yeah.
from the car, but I didn't get a sense that people were, panicked or anything. They were just surveying the area. I
Wow.
will, and I overlooked an important thing before all this happened. When we raised up, and we're, looking at what's on us and I looked down at my feet, and there was a picture of a young boy.
Wow.
At the bottom of my feet, and I sent you a picture of that. I don't know. I picked it up and I was like, and I showed it to Steve. And at that point, I realized, because you had said, when you're down there, worried about Steve's head, do you recognize that things are coming through the car? That point, no. But at that point, that's the point that I realized there must have been a lot of debris flying through the car, including this picture, which came out of somebody's house.
Did you keep that picture?
I did. I put it in a Ziploc bag with samples of the glass, and I had that with me for a long time. And it moved with us when we went to Texas, Austin. And then when I moved back here, I let it go. I didn't keep it anymore.
Do you remember any interactions? Did you talk with the young woman, with the older woman who are now in the back of your car? So now there are three people, total strangers from, I imagine, very, very different walks of life, who are now in this battered car with all the windows blown out. It's kind of an amazing scene, really. I mean, you know what it actually looked like. I'm just using my imagination, but it's kind of an amazing scene. You've got these strangers now in this car. The car has been battered. All the windows, I think, except for the windshield, are blown out. Are you just sitting there in silence, or?
Yeah, we're not really chatting. I mean, other than the "Are you okay?" kind of thing. The older lady was not talkative at that point. I mean, we talked later.
Yeah.
But when the three of us were in the car at the same time, no, not much. The young lady wasn't in the car too long with us, because at one point she says, "There's my dad," and he was coming and with her uncle down the street towards the car. I don't know how much longer. I mean, that happened after, the checking on the lady that was injured and the people starting to mill around. That's about the time frame that they started coming. And I remember having a sense of protection for her. I don't know why I was thinking, I'm not going to let her over to some strange people, which is it's not reasonable, because she's a graduate and she knows what her family looks like. Yeah. But I'm like, I remember saying to her, "Are you sure that's your dad?" And she's like, "Yeah, that's my uncle with him." Oh, wow. And even their uniting at the time I found to be surreal, because if you haven't experienced this, you're thinking that the norm would be, "Oh, daddy," and you run, and he's like, "Oh, my, I don't remember what her name was," hugging her and crying and all that. I mean, that's what I would have thought before. Yeah. That's what the scene would look like. She got out of the car, very calmly walked to them. He looked her up and down, said a few things to her. I don't remember. I don't know. I couldn't hear. patted her on the back, and the three of them turned around and walked back from where they came.
It kind of fits what you're describing of just this kind of, use the word dazed, things were very quiet, you're sitting in this car. You know, and folks might think, well, after experiencing this, then you would be sitting in the car swapping stories about what just happened, but you're saying no, it was quiet. So what you just described there kind of fits the whole tone, the whole spirit of the event.
It's like people are in control. It's like you got a hold on
just hyper
things,
calm
emotions. Yeah. I will say that I didn't feel emotions until days later. And
wow.
And we're getting out of sequence, but that's okay. If that's okay with you, I can explain that.
Yeah, please do.
So we flew out of Joplin Tuesday. The tornado was Sunday. We flew out Tuesday. Steve lived in Fort Worth at the time, but we both flew back to DC because that Wednesday, my nephew was graduating from college in Philadelphia. So we go to DC. Wednesday morning, we drive from DC to Philly. It's about a 3-hour drive, if that. And we park, and we're texting, and we see my mom. She's outside, and we go up to her, and the normal is that we hug. And I hugged her, and then I broke down. That was the point that I broke down.
Wow.
And it surprised me because I didn't know it was coming. She hugged me, and I just started sobbing.
Wow.
For probably a good minute, which is a long time.
Yeah.
And she doesn't have a clue. She knows there was a tornado, but she has no clue what I have just been through. And my mother is the biggest worrywart. And she's just patting me, saying, it's okay, it's okay. And after that, we really didn't talk at that point because it's my nephew's graduation. We're all getting together and everything, and trying to get ourselves to the auditorium.
Sure.
But that was something that I was not expecting.
Wow.
Yeah.
What do you remember about that flight out? Were you able to see out the windows? You're flying out of Joplin?
It was one of those small planes. And I know we rose up. It was quiet. And then all of a sudden, everybody's going to the closest window. Everybody's looking out the window. I don't think there was anybody not looking out the window. A little bit of chatter, not very loud. More quiet than chatter. And it's like, wow, it's a big area. I had a clue it was a big area because of our journey from where we were when the tornado hit to get to his sister's. That was another experience. So I had a clue that it was not just like a street or something that got hit, but seeing it from above, it's like flat toothpicks everywhere where trees used to be. Yeah. And, bigger buildings, you see damage, homes in various stages of destruction. Some are flattened, some still have something up. Yeah.
So we're back in the car. Did you tell the young woman, by the way, that you recognized her from the high school graduation? Do you remember saying anything about that?
I don't remember saying that. I don't remember.
Yeah.
I probably didn't because she just seemed like it's like the quiet might have been better,
Yeah.
other than, are you okay? That kind of thing.
Sure.
She wasn't really talkative. And if I see somebody who's not wanting to talk, I'm not going to push it.
Yeah.
And I'm not one who was in a talkative
sure.
mood either,
Right. Yeah, I understand. So she goes, and now it's you and the woman in her nightgown in the car. So what are the next few steps then in the story?
I think we get to a point where Steve gets back in the car. He's sitting in the driver's seat. Her son is now sitting next to her. And so there's 4 of us in the car now. And a long time had gone by. Maybe not quite an hour, but it was a while that we were still there, because we're texting. There's texting, and then not knowing what comes next, So anywhere from 30 minutes to an hour, we were there.
Wow. By the end of that time, had emergency vehicles started showing up, or no?
No, none.
Wow. God,
not that I remember.
Yeah.
Towards the end of us leaving there, I started hearing sirens in a distance, but where we were, no. Mm-mm. And that makes sense given what was out there.
Oh, meaning the emergency vehicles were elsewhere, responding to other things.
And it wasn't that easy to maneuver the area. I remember behind us, the street had like some debris in it. So when we sat there and Steve says, okay, let's see if we can start. And at that point, before him starting, we had one of the things that between his sister back and forth was bring those 2 with you. Because we asked them, I think we asked them, do you have family that we can take you to? And they were like, no. And so I think at that point that Teresa, Steve's sister, said, just bring them and say it's all texting. I think at one point too, we learned that Steve's niece and husband had approached the area where we were, but they couldn't get in because it was now barricaded. The police were stopping people from going into the area.
Okay, yeah.
So they didn't attempt it.
Right.
And I think also part of that was like, don't bother. We're going to try and get out, because the car was still running. It had been running the entire time with the radio on low volume. Yeah.
Really? And what was playing on the radio? Or was it just white noise?
It was background noise. It was low. I don't know. It wasn't loud enough to interfere with any of that stuff. In fact, he must have turned it down at some point, because when we had the silence, I don't remember hearing a radio. The only reason I know it was on is the dashboard.
Oh, right.
And that's later when I was looking at pictures. I was like, oh, the radio was still on. I don't remember hearing the radio.
Oh.
So when we started hearing the sirens in the background far, I think that was correlated to the time that we decided, okay, let's see if we can get out.
Where did you go?
So as we started moving, the gentleman in the back said, do you mind swinging by our house? It's on the way out. Oh, no problem. So we went forward, and then we took I think a left turn. Or I think there was a circle there, and then we went in that left direction.
Sort of a roundabout kind of thing?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
And we drove by their house. We may have, I don't remember if we stopped or not. I don't think we stopped. I don't remember because I know, and you know, it gets all jumbled up in the
Sure.
memory, but I know that
Yeah.
they had miniature horses and they had a dog, and I think we just drove by. We may have stopped and looked at it and said, wow. And they were looking at it, and we kept going. And we saw the barricade that we had been told about. And we drove around it. And we started the journey. And I think at some point during our it started raining again. It wasn't right after. It was.
And you're in a car with no windows.
We have the windshield.
Yeah.
But yeah, we don't have any other. And so when it was all said and done, when we got to Steve's sister's, we were wet. Car was wet. We were wet.
When you went by the home of the folks who are now in the back of your car, so I'm guessing that was in a neighborhood. Do you remember seeing, you know, just talking about the people, were there people milling around? What kind of memories do you have of that?
I remember sitting in the car and looking to my right at their house and saying, wow. And I think at that point, they may have said something to us about how they survived it. That they had, yeah, it was pretty bad. And they had taken shelter, interior of their house by a closet. And then I'm looking to my left, and there's houses that look kind of like in the same condition as theirs, with the exception of one house. I seem to remember there was one house that didn't look too bad, and thinking, wow, you know, that's a lucky person there.
So you have a lot of homes that are destroyed, but then this one home that, so far as you could see, was still in good shape.
It has all its sides. The roof, you know, has some damage, but you don't see holes into the house.
Wow.
And it wasn't a very big house, and I'm just like, wow, how did that happen? Kind of thing.
Were there people out, or?
And as I'm seeing this, I'm not seeing a lot of people.
Wow.
Maybe I saw one or two to the left. Not a lot. Not a lot of people. It wasn't a fully populated neighborhood, so to speak. You know, it wasn't one of these neighborhoods where, you know, you've got a homeowners association, everything, and this cookie cutter, you know, house for house.
Right.
It seemed to be, you know, you had a mix of some industrial, which is where we were, and then this house, which wasn't too far from the gas station. You know, maybe there were, I don't know, maybe there were maybe 6 on either side of the street. Homes, smaller homes. So it wasn't like a huge neighborhood.
Not a huge neighborhood. Yeah.
And I don't remember seeing a lot of people. I don't remember them saying, "Oh, here's so and so, and here's so and so. Hey, how are you guys? Okay?" That kind of thing. No, not at that point. I don't remember that.
So you passed by their. I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
You know, so you pass by their home, you see the destruction there, you see the other homes destroyed. Then there's this one home that, relative to the others, is in good shape. And where do we go from there?
So then we head towards the barricade and we go around it. And then it was a miserable journey because on so many levels, because you would think with the two in the back and Steve, who was very familiar with Joplin, that it would be a no-brainer to get to his sisters. It wasn't that close, but I don't northwest, south, where she is. I'm not one of those people that do the north-south.
Yeah.
But I knew it was, it wasn't that close. I knew that they were okay and that their neighborhood had not been hit. So we're turning and you're seeing destruction everywhere. And that, I talked about neighborhood association, because we're trying to turn down streets to find a route to get to his sisters, but the three of them are feeling challenged because there's no mile mark, not mile markers, but
no signs, no landmarks.
Landmarks, that's the word.
Yeah.
It's kind of hard to get your bearing with that scene. So, like in the back, and I think his name was David, was like, well, turn here. And even his mother at various points was like, well, maybe do this kind of thing. And you turn into a street and you see barricades, and it would be a neighborhood like I talked about, and it's flattened.
Barricades meaning stuff laying in the streets, that blocking the road.
No. Those, yeah, when you put up a barricade.
Oh, police barricades, yeah.
Police barricades, yeah.
Okay.
And when you turn in, you'd see that, so they're not allowing you to go through that neighborhood. You see nothing; it's all flattened out. And you see people milling around. And that didn't last too long because it was getting dark. So, the first few times we did that, you could see into the neighborhood.
Yeah.
But then it got dark. And so not only do you not have your landmarks, it's now dark. I don't think that the street lights were operational. It was dark.
Wow.
And whatever light you see is battery or generator operated, but there's no power. And we're getting wet. It's dark, and we're trying to find our way.
And the rain is coming into the car because aside from the windshields, you don't have any windows.
Yeah, getting wet. So sitting wet. Every now and then you feel like a thing of glass. Feet, and I had sandals on, and I was like, that's why when I shelter now, when there's a warning, I make sure I have really solid shoes. For the next couple of days, every now and then I find pieces of glass. Even though I washed my hair, I find pieces of glass. At least, the first day I took showers, second day, third day, I find pieces of glass. It had gotten everywhere. Clothes, pockets. Go to do laundry, the launder the items that you were wearing, and there was pieces of glass in the pockets. How that got into the pocket, I have no clue. I remember when being in that gas station, the level that I was in, the state, which was kind of like hold pattern kind of thing, came down a notch because it was like, wow, normalcy. This is normal. Because we've been in my car for hours. We didn't get to his sister's house until, I want to say it was around midnight that we got there.
Really? And the tornadoes, like, I think, 5:30, 6 o'clock range right in there is when it happens.
So that it took us that long to get there.
So this is quite a scene. the car that's been battered, the driver's side won't open, all the windows except the windshield are broken out. Everybody's soaking wet from the rain, glass, debris. A fellow in the back in sweats, his mom in her nightgown. And now you're rolling out to this gas station undamaged, the electricity's working. Did you notice other people looking at you? I mean, this is, you know, from the perspective of someone who, you know, was maybe an hour away when the tornado hit. Maybe they knew, but to them, it's something that happened far away. And now they're looking at, you know, this spectacle of this car. And I mean, did you pick anything up from people at the gas station? Like, what in the world happened to you? Were there any sorts of discussions?
Yeah, I remember when we pulled up, there was a gentleman who was pumping gas facing us. So the two cars were facing each other, different directions.
Yeah.
And I remember when we got out, he kind of looked at us. He wasn't surprised. So I think what you're saying that, you know, people knew the tornado happened. I think he said something like, "You guys okay?"
Wow.
You guys okay? And I think Steve said, "Yeah, we're fine. We're doing fine," kind of thing. Other than that, nothing, because I didn't go into the convenience store. I mean, I'm sure I know, because I finally did get a look at what I looked like. I was wet and, you know, and, you know, the poor lady's in her nightgown with a blanket. I don't think Steve may have gone in, but the three of us didn't. So I didn't get an opportunity to observe reactions other than it was gas.
Wow. So you do finally get to Steve's sister's house, and how does that, you know, what's that like at those first moments when you realize you finally got to the place where you can maybe take a breath for a little while?
I remember I was pulling into the driveway, and I don't know why that action. I remember again Steve putting the car in park and kind of exhaling, you know, me. Okay, we're here. Because up until then, you're kind of like on a whole path. You're kind of a little bit taut also, because it's like, okay, what's coming next kind of thing. Release. Because now I don't have to worry about, you know, what's coming next. They had no power. The whole neighborhood didn't have power.
Oh, really?
No damage, but no power.
Wow.
They came out. I think Steve's sister had blankets with her. You guys finally made it, you know, yay. And meeting the two that we brought home. They took us inside. Don't know at what point we cleaned ourselves up, showers. I don't know if the shower happened. I think it happened that night. It makes sense that it would have been that night, but I think to remember also a nice shower the next day. They had a big generator. So they had various things, you know, fridge and stuff hooked up to it. And I think we just cleaned up because I think I seem to remember the next day something about we've got hot water now. If you guys want to take a shower, a long shower. We sat around their dining room table. They had food for us. Poor David, I think he was very apologetic, because in getting out of the house after the tornado, he left behind his dentures.
Oh, yeah.
And his mom, she struck me as a really intelligent lady. She's one of those folks that sit, maybe don't talk too much, but they're watching everybody. And so she was observing everybody. Okay, we're here. Who are these people, kind of thing?
Yeah.
we got to hear, their story about how they sheltered, you know. There was more chatter around the table. I think the fact that Steve's sister and husband were kind of relaxed and were playing hosts to us was had a relaxing effect on everybody.
So that first evening, then, I mean, I'm assuming they were asking questions, or was it more of a let's just not talk about it and talk about something else kind of thing?
At that point, there was talking. I didn't say much. Steve was retelling our story. They were telling us, about Steve's niece and nephew, and how they sheltered by the movies, and they weren't there. I think they went to his Steve's nephew's husband was also from Joplin, so I think they went to his family's house, which wasn't damaged. I understood.
Right.
And then David and his mom were primarily David. His mom wasn't saying much. She'd interject every now and then, telling us again their experience, and we learned a little bit about who they were and all that. And I wasn't very talkative still at that point. Everybody else was talking, because I remember at one point I was coming back from the kitchen, and Steve's brother-in-law, he just looked at me and said, "Holly, are you okay?" I said, "Yeah, I'm fine." And I'm just, he had a concerned look on his face. So I must have been still kind of like on the hold pattern.
Yeah.
I'm not gonna let this get away from me, kind of thing. It's just observe and get through it. Wow. Basically. I briefly talked to my mom, and all I said to her was I was okay. And I got from talking to her that she didn't really understand the magnitude of what we just been through, even though she had it on the news. But the fact that, we were in a rental car, people, when you say you're in a rental car, then, you didn't get flipped over or sucked up in there, then, you should be okay, kind of thing. So I just said, we're okay, and we're at Steve's sisters, and, we'll see you on Wednesday. And that was it.
Wow.
She didn't have a clue. My sister didn't have a clue. Wasn't on her radar. None of my nephews, nobody on my friends, everybody east didn't have a clue what I had just been through. And I think that popped into my head maybe once or twice. Like, I'm here, went through this, and they don't have a clue.
It's almost like there's a theme of, well, we've used the word abandonment or loneliness, where you're there, and for some period of time after the storm passes, there's just great quiet. You're wondering where the emergency service is. They're not there. And then you're connecting to people that in the East, and in a different sense, they're not there. I mean, they're not there physically, but they're not there psychologically. They're not there emotionally, because even if they know about the news, it's kind of an abstraction. You're okay, so no big deal. Is that kind of, was there kind of a lonely feeling to this? Like, I've just been through something just mind-boggling, and, you're not on your own because there are people around, but was there a little bit of that feeling, like, kind of a feeling of loneliness?
I think so, being alone. Yep. Because I didn't feel like I was abandoned, like I was a victim. Never thought I was a victim, but there was a sense of, being out of your element after such a big event.
That fits a general story. You described the the father coming to get the young woman in the car, and you would have expected, the movie version would be some great emotional event there. The dad is so relieved, and the young woman is so relieved, and that expresses itself in some powerful moment. But the way you describe it is he comes up, looks her over, presumably making sure she's okay, asks her a few things, and they just walk off.
Mhm.
Wow, that's amazing. So you arrive on Saturday, you go to this graduation on Sunday, then of course the tornadoes, Sunday late afternoon, early evening. You get to the place where you're going to stay that night around midnight, give or take. You leave on Tuesday. So what are you doing on Monday?
So on Monday, we were focused on helping David and his mom. So we went back with them, Steve's sister, Steve, myself, and the two went back to their house and kind of in a salvage mode.
To see what you could save from their home.
Yeah, and they wanted to assess the damage to as far as the inside of their belongings. We climb into the house because we can't get in through the front door. And a few things that are like vivid in my memory is I followed David to the bathroom, the one that he used, and there's a lot of like debris and stuff in there. And the sink, it's one of those standalone sinks, doesn't have a cabinet, is in its place, and sitting on it is a glass, hasn't been tossed around or anything, and in it is dentures.
Jeez.
And he was so relieved and happy, and I heard him laugh, actually.
Did he just grab the dentures right out of the jar and put them in, or?
Yeah, he picked up the glass, picked them out, and kind of assessed them, and put them back in, because he had been upset about the fact that he didn't have them for that long a time. Wow. It was really on his mind. He mentioned it several times the night before. I remember that clearly. I remember he showed us the closet that they stood in. It's like a pantry that they stood in front of, opening the door, and they had all their china in there on shelves, and it was nothing had come off the shelves, and it was very organized pantry. Nothing around it, there's siding missing and all this, but very neat.
So the home, I mean, would you use the word destroyed to describe the home in general?
Absolutely. Yep.
So the home is destroyed, but there are these little areas within the home, the china cabinet untouched, the glass with the dentures untouched.
Yeah, it wasn't a china cabinet, it was a closet.
Oh, a closet, okay.
I don't know how to explain it.
Yeah.
Like a pantry with a door. Okay.
Right.
And so that now in their living room, they had a glass wood kind of, you could call it a china cabinet. That had a little bit of damage in it. The glass was still intact, but it wasn't standing square on four legs. And there were pieces in there that were intact. And in fact, his mom was saying, oh, this was my aunt's, blah, blah, blah. This is my, as they collect that stuff. That living room, there's a big hole in the wall, stuff on the floor, that I think they may have even had debris that didn't belong to the house that was in the house. Possibly. I know in their yard. It looked like a motor from a boat or something that was in a tree. And when I say in a tree, it's really, there wasn't a tree. It's, it's jumbled in with a bunch of other things. Wow. They had a Chihuahua. And that's the other thing I remember. When the warning happened, part of their sheltering is they put the dog in its cage. But they hadn't brought it out with them when they were coming out, when they found us. And the dog was in there and he was terrified. He was kind of like this. And David opened the cage, got him out, checked him, and then I ended up holding him. And I remember David saying, wow, he doesn't usually like people. And I think the reason he just sat there in my arms is poor dog was very traumatized. So there was that. And then they were looking for, they had miniature horses. He and Steve were out there and they were looking, and I think they only found one. I don't know how many they had at the house. They had a bunch of others somewhere at a farm that they had housed. So after that, we went to to the farm of people that they knew that they were housing, and they went in to check out the miniatures, make sure they were okay. And I remember sitting in the car with Steve's sister, and a storm started with lightning. And I was very concerned, extremely concerned, because in my head, I'm like, tornado. Yeah. Even though we hadn't been listening to the radio or anything. And I'm like, I got out of the car, I went and I said, you guys, we need to leave. And went back to the car, and they're not following me. And they're taking their time, what appeared to me. And I'm looking at Steve's sister like, what, and she's just, like that. And then they eventually came out, and it turned out just to be a regular thunderstorm. But I remember being very concerned, like, we're going to go through this again. Yeah. And I think we also went to a Walmart to pick up some things that they would need in the next couple of days. Around that time now, we're starting to talk about missing people. Did they hear about so-and-so? Did they find so-and-so? And now it's more people, conversation around people, and so-and-so made it, so-and-so didn't, this one's missing. And Steve's nephew is like, continually taking inventory of his classmates, and did so-and-so, we still don't know what it is. And there had been a fellow in his graduating class that had huge plans about going to California, and he had his own business at this point. It was like an internet kind of thing. And he didn't make it. And I didn't learn he didn't make it until I was back in DC, because he was missing for a while. And he's the young guy that had been in a Hummer, I think it was a Hummer, with his dad. And his dad had tried to grab a hold of him, and he'd been sucked out of the car. He was missing for a couple of days. I don't remember that anybody else that his nephew knew having lost their life, or since then, if anybody, how many, I look at the pictures that I took at graduation, where you have everybody sitting. And I look at, when I say that, when I went home, and I would look at them and I say, how many of these people survived? That thought. Teachers and family and kids. And then the next day, Tuesday, Steve's sister drove us to the airport. And on the way there, we stopped off at a Sonic to get some breakfast burritos. And I remember thinking, that was for me, that was surreal, because it felt so normal. That they're up, up and running. Yeah. We can pull up, talk, get our order, and be eating, because that was a normal event versus what we experienced, or sitting in a house without power, with a generator, talking about people who made it and didn't make it. Yeah, I don't know why that particular event, the Sonic, was like, that's surreal.
I'm assuming in the flight between Joplin and, you go straight from Joplin to Philadelphia?
We go to DC, spend the night at my house, and then wake up the next morning and drive to Philly.
So this might seem like a irrelevant question, but there's a reason I'm asking it for the next one. But do you remember where you had a layover? I'm assuming between Joplin and DC, you're going to lay over somewhere at a bigger airport.
No, I don't remember that.
Oh, so the reason I asked that is because I'm just wondering. I was at an airport yesterday myself, so you know, the airport's in my mind. But do you remember having thoughts as you're walking through the airport to catch your, you know, you've arrived from Joplin and now you're going to get on a bigger plane to go to DC, walking through the airport, seeing so many thousands of people just carrying on with their normal lives? Did you have thoughts like, you folks just don't have a clue about what just happened?
And I don't know if we had a direct flight or not. We flew into National Airport. I do remember when we were walking, you know, we took a cab home. I was always a cab away from the airport.
Yeah.
Having that kind of a feeling, because I seem to remember that the monitors, you know, they always have like CNN or whatever on there. You could see footage.
Oh, wow.
The destruction. They were still, I mean, they were talking about this even on the East Coast for days.
Wow. Yeah, sure.
And I'm looking at it. I recognize it. I look down and people are walking around doing their thing. And it's like, wow, we made it out. And you guys don't have a clue. And that's in my head.
Right.
You guys do not have you see this, but you do not have a clue. That's what's in my head.
Wow. Yeah. That is amazing. And so the next day is Wednesday, and then this is where you, if I remember right, this is where you see your mom and things kind of, you know, it hits you. Since that time, has anyone ever sat down with you and said, you know, tell me in detail what happened?
Nope.
No.
No. I never went into detail with my mom about it. Her son, but what I told her, I don't think she really fully grasps the experience, and that's okay with me because I don't need her to. You know, with the graduation and us eating afterwards and everything, I think maybe Steve may have told the story, you know, the way he does. And I remember going back to work. You know, in 11 years, I think maybe I can count on one hand my telling people, oh yeah, I was in the Joplin tornado. And the response I get back, oh yeah, that's it. Nobody says, and you know, it's East Coast people, right? I don't know how much, I don't think that they were glued to the TV or anything. And when I get that response, it's like, yeah, and that's it. No.
That's why I'm really glad you've agreed to share this story here.
And I wasn't going to, by the way. You know, Steve mentioned that, yeah, I got interviewed and all that. And if you want, you know, you can be interviewed too. And initially I was like, you know, I don't need to. And then I saw pieces of his video, and I know you sent me the full one. I watched that too. And I had the need to do that because I hadn't really done it before. Steve was always the spokesman for it, and that's okay. I mean, you know, people are different.
Sure.
But it's a little bit disappointing when you tell somebody, yeah, I was in the Joplin tornado, not that I'm looking for attention, but you get the, oh yeah, there's a little piece of you that says, wow, you know, if only you knew. I don't need to share it with you, but if only you knew. And our experience is not the same as the people whose lives were destroyed through the loss of a family, friend, their homes, places of business. At least we got to get on a plane and go back to normal.
Yeah.
So I don't in any way, you know, when I say I was in the Joplin Tornado, maybe that's why I don't say something like, let me tell you some more, because really we got off so easy. So easy. And as a matter of fact, you know, after the first couple of days, Steve's brother, who lived at the different part of Missouri at the time, you know, when he initially heard that, you know, we were in it and we sat through it in the rental car, he's like, no way, you weren't in the tornado. You were in the outskirts. No way. There's no way. And because, you know, sitting in a rental car, that's I don't know, unusual is the right word, but if you're really in a bad tornado, you should be sucked up, right? That's the rationale or the logic that until you see the destruction, and you do see that certain things, you know, like that street we were on, some cars are upright and some are upside down, and it's like they're right next to each other. So how come this one got flipped and this one stayed on the ground?
Yeah.
It's the nature of the tornado. And so because he was saying that initially, and then Steve explained to him where we were and everything, and the maps came out, you know, with the area that covered. I remember the next week I got on the computer at work and I said, okay, I'm not a person that knows north, south, west and all that. I want to know exactly where we were. I pulled up one of those satellite map kind of dealies.
Right.
And I marked where we were. And I saw the gas station on there and realized, yeah, we were right there.
And the gas station you have marked, is that the station where where that famous recording is?
That's my understanding.
We're good. We're gonna do it.
I'm really grateful that you've taken this time to share these memories, and I hope that others who over time who hear you, I hope that they'll be encouraged to share their own memories. I think what you describe is normal. I hear it from combat veterans all the time. Combat veterans will say that they'll come home and they'll realize that, you know, people may say thank you for your service, but they don't really want to hear about what happened. And for some reason, there doesn't seem to be much of an interest in just sitting down and giving another person the gift of undivided attention. It's so important. And especially,
thank you for doing this.
Yeah, well, and, you know, and especially, I mean, just as a historical matter, this is one of the most destructive storms in American history, you know, so everything else, you know, put aside, there is just that. I mean, historically, it's an important event. And so to talk to someone who was there and who saw it firsthand, you know, that's, you know, for the interviewer, that's the gift of hearing the story.